We all know that numbers are the building blocks of mathematics. But the study of mathematics goes beyond numbers to include variables, shapes, objects, and much more. Let's explore one more aspect of mathematics with this illustration. Let us list a few collection of objects such as tall students in your class, all union territories in India, interesting books on mathematics, natural numbers below 5, books in the library, very large numbers. We can see in some cases, such as the Union Territories of India, natural numbers below 5, and books in a library, the collection is the same for everyone, while in other cases, such as tall students, interesting books, etc., it differs. Notice that the collections involving qualitative adjectives differ from person to person, while those with a definite property are the same for everyone. In all cases where there is a definite property, given an object, we can definitely decide whether it should be in that collection or not. For example, Punjab does not belong to the collection of all Union Territories of India as it is not a Union Territory. The number 1 belongs to the collection of natural numbers below 5 as 1 is a natural number. Such collections involving a definite property or relation or pattern or a particular definition are referred to as well-defined collections. And these well-defined collections are called sets. Sets are the core of an important branch of mathematics called set theory. Shall we find out more about them? Let's first see why it is important to study sets. Mathematics is written in the language of sets, so it is important to understand the sets and their notation. The theory of sets forms a basis for finding out more about other branches of mathematics such as calculus, probability and statistics, which we shall study later. Set theory was developed by a Russian-born German mathematician, Georg Cantor. He encountered sets while working on problems associated with the trigonometric series. Sets were part of mathematical study before Cantor, but he gave the modern definition of sets. According to Cantor, a set is a well-defined collection of objects. Let's look at some examples. Sets we might encounter in daily life include a pack of cards, the students in a class, a cricket kit, and crockery items in a shop. And now, some sets from mathematics. Odd numbers, prime numbers, types of triangles, roots of the equation x squared minus 3x plus 2 equals 0. The objects in these collections are called the elements of the sets. In fact, objects, elements, and members of a set are synonymous terms. Notice that the elements of a set do not repeat. Here are some common sets which we have been using in mathematics from earlier grades. They are n, the set of natural numbers, z, the set of integers, the set of rational numbers q, the set of real numbers r, z positive, the set consisting of only positive integers, and the set of positive rational numbers q positive, and finally r positive, the set of positive real numbers. Let's go back to our previous examples and see whether the collections of tall students in your class, interesting books on mathematics, and very large numbers are sets or not. The terms tall, interesting, very large are all subjective. In other words, the deciding criteria are not clearly defined or well defined. Hence, these collections are not sets. Now let's look at set notations. Sets are generally denoted by uppercase letters and their elements by lowercase letters. We use the symbols shown on screen, read as belongs to, does not belong to show that a particular object is in or is not in the set. The symbol for does not belong to is a crossed out form of the symbol for belongs to. So, If X is an element of set Y, we write X belongs to Y, and if T is not an element of Y, we write T does not belong to set Y. Let's now see how sets are represented. There are two chief ways to represent a set algebraically. One is in roster form and the other is in set builder form. Roster form is also called tabular form. In this method, a set is represented by listing all its elements, separating these by commas and enclosing them in curly brackets. For example, if V is the set of vowels of the English alphabet, it can be written in roster form as shown. Similarly, if A is the set of natural numbers below 6, then A is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in curly brackets is in the roster form. Note that to write a set in roster form, elements must not be repeated. That is, all elements must be distinct. For example, if A is the set of letters used in the word mathematics, then in the roster form, A is equal to M, A, T, H, E, I, C, S in curly brackets and not M, A, T, H, E, M, A, T, I, C, S. Now that we understand the roster form, let's go on to the second method of representing a set, the set builder form. In this form, elements of the set are not listed but are represented by some common property. In the example of V, the set of vowels of the English alphabet, V can be written in the set builder form as V is equal to open curly bracket X such that X is a vowel of English alphabet, close curly bracket. Note that the colon is read as such that. Such that may also be represented as a single vertical bar. Similarly, if A is the set of natural numbers below 6, then A can be written in the set builder form as A is equal to open curly bracket X such that X is a natural number and X is less than 6, close curly bracket. Take note that in set builder form, a set is denoted by stating the properties that its members satisfy. The satisfying property is not always unique. For example, consider a set of alphabets PRINCIAL. In this, we could interchange elements without impacting the set. In the set builder form, one possible formula is X such that X is a letter of the word principal. Another possibility is X such that X is a letter used in the phrase call rain in April. You can try to work out other ways of writing this set in the set builder form. Similarly, if A is the set of natural numbers below 6, then A is written in the set builder form as A is equal to X such that X is a natural number and X is less than 6. We may also write it as A is equal to X such that X is a positive integer and X is less than or equal to 5. Besides the two algebraic methods, a geometric or pictorial representation of sets is also possible and is used often. This pictorial representation of sets is called the Venn diagram, after the English mathematician John Venn, who introduced it. Venn diagrams are simple closed curves. Any simple closed figure is said to represent a set. Most common are circles and rectangles. Venn diagrams are usually used to picture relationships between different sets. Let's solve some problems based on converting one form of set representation to another. We are given sets represented in roster or tabular form. We have to write them in set builder form. Given sets in set builder form, we have to write them in roster form. The set A consists of elements X such that X is a 2-digit natural number such that the sum of its digits is 7. Let us write set A in roster form. We have to express these sets given in roster form in set builder form. In a village, there is a barber who every day shaves every man who doesn't shave himself and no one else. Can you tell? Does the barber shave himself? Think about the answer. Is your answer yes? He shaves himself. Remember, the barber shaves only those who do not shave themselves. So, you are not right. Is your answer no, he doesn't shave himself? Then he must go to this barber, that is himself. So, this can't be the right answer either. This situation is the popular version of Russell's paradox. The paradox goes something like this. Consider the set of all sets that are not members of themselves. Such a set appears to be a member of itself if and only if it is not a member of itself. Hence the contradiction. Russell's paradox led contemporary mathematicians to look at various means of restricting the principles governing the existence of sets. Let us look at some sets. Set of natural numbers, set of alphabets, set of continents in the world, whole number that is not a natural number, number which is neither prime nor composite, set of solutions of equation x squared minus 1 is equal to 0 where x is a real number. Did you notice that each set has a different number of elements? This leads to categorization of sets on the basis of the number of elements in them. Let's explore how sets are categorized on the basis of the number of elements. We can categorize sets on the basis of the number of elements in them. The first categorization is finite and infinite sets. If the set has a definite number of elements, then it is finite. Otherwise, it is infinite. So, from among the sets we saw in the beginning, the set of natural numbers is infinite, whereas all others are finite sets. Let's consider some more sets and categorize them as finite or infinite. Consider these sets: the set of stars in the Milky Way galaxy, the set of molecules in a glass of water. Are these sets finite or infinite? Since the number of elements in the sets is too large to count, these sets may seem infinite, but actually they are finite. Notice that a group that cannot be counted is not necessarily infinite. Similarly, the set of men or women at a particular time on the earth is finite, though it is difficult to count them. However, the set of natural numbers is infinite. Let us prove it. We shall prove this by contradiction. Suppose that the set of natural numbers is finite. Then we must have a greatest natural number. Let's call it n. Well then, what is n plus 1? It must also be a natural number, given the property of natural numbers that every number has a successor and must therefore belong to this set. We have a contradiction here, as n plus 1 is greater than n. This contradiction arises because of the assumption that natural numbers are finite. This means that the set of natural numbers is infinite. What about the set of points on a line segment? Is it finite or infinite? That is also an infinite set, as the number of points between the ends of a segment is not definite. You may be wondering, then what is infinite? How large must be a set to be called infinite? To understand this, consider this illustration. Suppose there is a single grain of wheat. It does not comprise a heap, nor do 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 grains of wheat. However, at some point, the collection of grains becomes large enough to be called a heap. But there is apparently no definite point where this occurs. This is called a Sorites paradox. The name Sorites is derived from the Greek word soros, which means pile or heap. Similarly, there is no definite point beyond which we can declare that something is infinite. We loosely say that something is infinitely large. The concept of infinity was first given by British mathematician John Wallis in the year 1655. Let us now move further into the categorization of sets on the basis of the number of elements in them. We have seen that both finite and infinite sets have elements in them. These sets are called non-empty sets. But is it possible to define a set which has no elements? The answer is yes. A set which has no elements in it is called an empty set or a null set. We denote this set which has no elements in it by the Greek letter phi. We also write this set as a pair of curly braces containing no elements in it. And guess what? This set is as meaningful as the number 0. Its importance is not to be underestimated. Some examples of empty sets are a set X such that x plus x equals x and x is a natural number, as 2x equals x is not possible. Another example of a null set is set X such that x squared equals 9 and x is even. It is null because the number 3, whose square equals 9, is not an even number. Similarly, the set of girls in a boys' school is an empty set. What about the set with the element 0 in it? Is it empty? Note that the set with the element 0 in it is not an empty set as there is one element in it. In fact, a set having only one element is called a singleton set. For example, the set of solutions of the equation x plus 5 equals 0 is also a singleton set. The number of elements in a set is known as its cardinality. It is denoted by n brackets the name of the set. For example, n brackets A denotes the cardinality of set A. For example, if A is a set with elements 1, 2, 3 in it, then its cardinality is 3. Let's look at some sets and write their cardinality. In the first case, there are 7 distinct letters, so the cardinality of that set is 7. Next, the cardinality of set B, in which the only element is 10, is 1. The set C has 6 elements, so its cardinality is 6. And the set D has 2 elements, so its cardinality is 2. As with numbers, can we say two sets are equal? Yes, two sets can be equal to each other. Let's find out when they are equal. Two sets A and B are said to be equal if they have exactly the same elements. For example, the sets shown here are equal sets. Consider the sets A and B as shown with elements A, B, C, D and E and 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 respectively. Are they equal? Clearly, sets A and B are not equal even though each contains 5 elements. That is, the sets have the same cardinality. Sets that have the same cardinality are called equivalent sets, and we can write this symbolically as shown. For two sets to be equal, the same cardinality is therefore a prerequisite condition. In other words, all equal sets are equivalent but not vice versa. Do you think sets A and B given here are equal? Yes, indeed they are, because in sets the order of elements is not important. Let us now check these sets. The set C is the set of letters from the word alloy, and the set D is the set of letters from the word loyal. Are the two sets equal? We can see that both these sets can be written in the roster form as L, O, Y, A, L. So, the two sets are equal. We have seen that sets with the same cardinality are equivalent. But is this true in the case of infinite sets too? In other words, can we say that two infinite sets are equivalent? The answer is no. We can't say this in the case of infinite sets. To understand how two infinite sets may or may not be equivalent, let us listen to a story about two farmers. There are two farmers, each wanting to plant a very long row of seeds side by side in a field. Both the farmers have annoying birds nearby that hinder their efforts in different ways. As the first one walks along the row, sequentially dropping the seeds, his bird picks up every fifth seed that he drops. So after he finishes planting his row of seeds, are there any seeds left? Yes, indeed there are, and infinitely many of them. Now for the second farmer. After every fifth seed that he drops, his bird picks up the first seed that remains in the row. After the second farmer has finished planting his row of seeds, are there any seeds left? No. Each of the seeds gets picked up by his bird eventually. Isn't this strange? That both the farmers are working simultaneously and their birds pick up seeds at the same rate. But in one case, there are seeds left, whereas not in the other case. This situation arises because we are dealing with infinite sets and two infinite sets may or may not be equivalent. So be careful with infinite sets. Observe this map of India. It shows all its states and union territories. We can write all the states and union territories as a set. Let us call this set A. We can even make a set of all states. This set will, however, be smaller than the set of all states and union territories. Similarly, the set of all students of your school is a bigger set as compared to the set of all students of class 11. If we define a set and then take a part of that set, we build what we call a subset, and the bigger set is the superset of the smaller sets. Let's learn more about subsets and supersets. To understand the concept of subsets of a set, let's take a simple set, say A, consisting of first 5 natural numbers. Let's form sets B, C and D that are a part of set A. These smaller sets, that is, B, C and D, are called subsets of set A. Formally, we can say that a set A is a subset of another set B if every element of set A is also an element of set B. Symbolically, this is denoted as shown. On the other hand, set A is not a subset of set B if there is at least one element, say, X, in set A, which is not an element of set B. Symbolically, A is not a subset of B is denoted as shown here. We can say that in the fruits section of a supermarket, the set of apples is a subset of the set of fruits. Similarly, in the English language, the set of vowels is a subset of the set of alphabets. We have known some subsets for a few years without knowing that they are actually subsets. Let's find out these subsets. We denote the set of real numbers by R, the set of natural numbers by N, the set of integers by Z, the set of rational numbers by Q, and the set of irrational numbers by T. Every natural number is an integer, every integer is a rational number, and every rational number is a real number. Thus, N is a subset of Z, which is a subset of Q, which in turn is a subset of a set of real numbers. The set T is composed of all real numbers other than the rational numbers such as √2, pi, etc. Thus, T is a subset of R, but Q is not a subset of T. Using the definition of subset, can we say that a set A is a subset of itself? Since every element of set A is also in set A, so by definition, we can say that a given set A is a subset of A. Hence, we can generalize that every set is a subset of itself. This is denoted as shown here. Even though there is nothing factually wrong with this, it doesn't seem very proper, does it? We want our subsets to be proper. A proper subset of a set is one that can fit into that set. In other words, we can say that A is a proper subset of B if and only if every element in A is also in B and there exists at least one element in B that is not in A. In addition, when A is a proper subset of B, we say B is a superset of A. For example, in the given sets A and B, every element of set A, that is, 1 and 5, is an element of set B. At the same time, the elements 3 and 7 of set B do not belong to set A. In this case, A is a proper subset of B. How about the null set phi? Is this a proper subset for set A? Since we can't find any elements in the null set phi that are not in A, so it must be that all the elements in the null set are in the set A. So null set phi is a subset of every set including the null set phi. But phi is not a proper subset of set A. In fact, there are two trivial subsets for every set, the set itself and the null set phi. Recall that two sets are equal if they have the same elements. For example, sets A and B shown here are equal sets. Notice that every element of set A is also an element of B and every element of set B is also an element of A. In other words, in the case of equal sets A and B, set A is a subset of B and set B is a subset of A. Now, if A is a subset of B and B is also a subset of A, then can we say that A and B are equal sets? Yes, if A is a subset of B and B is a subset of A, then A and B must be equal. For instance, consider the sets A and B as given. In this case, both A and B are subsets of each other because all elements of set A are in set B and vice versa. Although the order of the elements are different in both the sets, but all elements of set A are in set B and all elements of set B are in set A. And that is all we need to prove the equality of sets. So, the set A is equal to set B. In other words, to prove equality of sets, we need to show that all elements of set A are in set B and all elements of set B are in set A. Can we now tell whether the two sets given in the set builder form are equal? Observe that set A includes prime numbers 2 and 3 which are less than 5 and set B includes prime number 2 which is also an even number. In this case, we find that all elements of set B are in set A. But set A has an element 3 that is not in set B, or set A is not a subset of set B. So A and B are not equal sets. Now, we have two sets, set X and set Y. Set X is in the set builder form and set Y is in the roster form. Are both these sets equal? Set X consists of natural numbers from 3 to 4. That means set X has only 3 and 4 as its elements. Also, set Y has 3 and 4 as its elements. We note here that all the elements of set X are in set Y and all elements of set Y are in set X. And this is what we need to show to prove equality of sets. So, we can say that set X is equal to set Y. We are familiar with the real number line simply called the number line. Let A, B be the two real numbers such that A is less than B. Now, the segment on the number line between A and B is a part of the number line itself. The set of real numbers corresponding to the portion of the number line is called an interval. The interval is obviously a subset of R. Further, if both are excluded, in that case, it is called a semi-closed interval. That is, we can also have intervals closed at one end and open at the other end. That is, square bracket A, comma B, round bracket is an open interval from A to B, including A but excluding B. Whereas round bracket A, comma B, square bracket is an open interval from A to B, including B but excluding A. The open and closed intervals can also be written in set notation using the set builder form. The set builder form of an open interval can be written as shown, and the set builder form of a closed interval can be written as shown. The interval that includes all elements from A to B, including A and excluding B. And lastly, the interval that includes all elements from A to B, excluding A and including B. The interval minus infinity to infinity describes the set of real numbers in relation to a number line. Some common subsets of the set R of real numbers are the set of non-negative real numbers, the set of positive real numbers, and the set of negative real numbers. Let us now write the given sets as intervals. The first set consists of all real numbers from -4 to 6, with -4 excluded and 6 included. So we write -4 and 6 in an ordered pair by placing an opening round bracket before -4 and a closing square bracket after 6. The second set consists of all real numbers between -12 to -10, that is, both endpoints excluded. So we write -12 and -10 as an ordered pair enclosed in round brackets. The third set consists of all real numbers from 0 to 7, with 0 included and 7 excluded. So we write 0 and 7 in an ordered pair by placing an opening square bracket before 0 and a closing round bracket after 7. This set consists of all real numbers from 3 to 4 with both endpoints included. So we write the pair 3, 4 in square brackets. We have discussed subsets and considered the situations when one set is a subset of the other. Let's now write the subsets for a given set, say set 1, 3, 5. To write the subsets of set A, first we write sets with one element, then we write sets with two elements, and then we write set with a combination of all three elements. Finally, we write the null set, one obvious subset of every set. The set of all these subsets of A is called the power set of set A and is denoted by P of A as shown. There were 3 elements in the set A and there are 8 elements in the power set of A. Notice that 8 is 2 raised to the power of 3. How many subsets does a set have? In other words, what is the cardinality of the power set of a set? The number of elements in a power set is 2 raised to the power of the number of elements in set A. So if n is the cardinality of set A, then the number of subsets of set A is 2 to the power of n, which is the cardinality of the power set P of A. So the number of subsets of a set with 6 elements is 2 to the power of 6. And the number of subsets with a set with 7 elements is 2 to the power of 7. Therefore, the number of subsets for a set of 7 elements is double the number of subsets for a set of 6 elements. Notice that as the total number of subsets doubles each time, the number of elements in a set increases by 1. Let's write the power set of the set A with elements 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's list down all the subsets. First, we write the set with no elements, then we include the set with 1 element, then 2 elements, and then 3 elements, and finally all 4 elements. We must note that pi, the empty set, is the subset of all sets. However, in the case of the power set, it is an element. Now, what is the power set of a null set? It is like asking, there is nothing available, so what do you choose? In the case of a null set, your only choice is nothing. So power set has only just one subset, which is itself the empty set. Is there any set that contains all sets in consideration, similar to how the Milky Way galaxy contains all objects of our solar system? Let's find out. Consider the sets shown here. Can you think of a set that can contain all these sets? One set, among many others, that can contain them all is the set of alphabets of the English language. Such a set is called the universal set and is usually denoted by U. Generally speaking, the universal set is a big set such that all other sets under discussion are its subsets. The set of all students of a school could be a universal set if we are discussing different sets of students above age 12. Thus, a universal set is a set that contains all elements or objects involved in the problem under consideration. Furthermore, a set that is a universal set for one problem may not be a universal set for another problem. For example, the Milky Way galaxy is not an appropriate universal set for the stars in the other galaxy. In other words, the universal set does not contain everything. It is just the superset of all sets under consideration. Suppose set S includes all states of India. Then for set S, India is a universal set. Asia may also be considered the universal set of set S, or for that matter, even the world is its universal set. It is interesting to note that generally, for sets in consideration, there can be more than one universal set containing all given sets. For example, for the set of right-angled triangles, the set of all triangles can be a universal set, or even the set of polygons can be the universal set, because a right-angled triangle is basically a triangle or a polygon with specific characteristics. A set of quadrilaterals can be taken as universal set while considering the set of squares. Now, we have to write one more set that belongs to this universal set, the set of quadrilaterals, and also one more set that may be taken as the universal set for the set of squares. Any other set of quadrilaterals can be the set that belongs to this universal set, for example, the set of rectangles. One more set that may be taken as the universal set for the set of squares can be the set of closed curves. Given the sets A, B and C, we need to decipher which of the following may be considered as universal set or sets for all of the three sets A, B and C. It can be seen that A and B are both subsets of the first set containing A, B, C, D, E, F, G. However, set C has the element I in it too, which is not there in the given set. This means that C is not a subset of the given set. Therefore, the set with elements A, B, C, D, E, F, G cannot be the universal set for the sets A, B and C. The second given set is phi, which contains no element in it. Therefore, none of the sets A, B or C are its subsets. So obviously, phi cannot be the universal set for the sets A, B and C. The third set with elements A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, however, contains all three sets A, B and C. It is therefore the universal set for sets A, B and C. A and B are subsets of the last set containing B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. However, set C has the element A in it too, which is not there in the given set. This means that C is not a subset of the given set. Therefore, the set we perform the operations of addition, subtraction, multiplication and division on numbers. Each one of these operations performed on a pair of numbers generates another number. Can we perform the operations of addition, subtraction, multiplication and division on sets as well? Well, not really. But there are some similar operations that can be represented by the symbols shown. These operations, when performed on two sets, give rise to another set. We will define and discuss the properties of one such operation on sets called union of sets. To understand the operation of union of sets, let's consider the following sets: the set of boys and the set of girls in your class. These two sets together make the set of students of your class. This set of students of your class is called the union of the set of boys and the set of girls in your class. Let's now formalize the definition of union of sets. Given two sets A and B, the union is the set that contains elements or objects that belong to either A or to B or to both. Note that the operation of union is denoted by the symbol shown. Using the set builder form, we can write A union B is a set containing all elements X such that X belongs to A or to B. Note that OR is the key word for union. Talking of two sets, there can be three possibilities. First possibility is that the sets have no common elements. The second possibility is that there are some elements in common to the two sets, and the third possibility is that all elements of one set are there in the second set. Let's take one example of each type to understand union of sets. Let's first take the example of two sets that have no common elements. If A is the set of countries in Asia and B is the set of countries in Africa, then for the set A union B, we are talking about all countries in Asia and all countries in Africa, or a country lying in both Asia and Africa, if there indeed was a country like that. Now, let's take sets that have some common elements. Imagine you have two sets. Set A, which is the set of all types of fruit sold at your local market, and set B, which is the set of your favorite fruit. Let's imagine that the first set A has 5 elements, namely peach, orange, plum, apple, strawberry. And let's imagine that set B has 3 elements, cherry, banana, peach. The union of these sets is a new set formed by combining the different unique elements from each of the individual sets. Union, as you may have noticed, is actually the analog of addition for sets. Notice that peach, that was an element of both the sets, appears only once in the union set, as elements are not repeated in a set. To take an example of the two sets, such that one set is completely contained in the other, consider set Z, that is a set of integers, and set Q, that is a set of rational numbers. In this case, Z union Q is actually the set Q itself, as Z is contained in Q. Thus, we have seen the union of sets that have no element in common, some elements in common, and when one of the sets is actually a subset of the other set. Do you think the union of two sets can be represented as a Venn diagram in all three cases? Let's see. In the first case, there is no country that lies both in Asia and Africa. So, the Venn diagram will have two non-overlapping circles, and the union will have all elements lying in their respective individual circles. In the second case, the sets have an element in common, so the circles in the Venn diagram will be intersecting and their union will be intersecting as well as the non-intersecting part. In the third case, one set is completely contained in the other. Thus, their union will be as shown in the Venn diagram. The union of sets is a binary operation, that is, it applies to two sets. But we can have the union of more than two sets also. Let's find out more about the union of more than two sets. The union of two sets is again a set. Thus, we can find the union of the set obtained by union with a third set. In fact, we can extend this process to any number of sets. Let us now define the union of three sets. Given three sets A, B and C, the union is the set that contains elements or objects that belong to either A or B or C. Basically, we find A union B union C by putting all elements of A, B and C together. Similarly, given sets A1, A2, A3 up to AN, we can define the union of n sets. Let's now discuss the properties of operation of union of sets. The main properties of the union of the sets are the closure property, commutative property, associative property, law of identity element, idempotent law, and the law of U, the universal set. Let us discuss each property one by one. The first property of operation of union of sets is the closure property. Closure property states that a set is closed under an operation if on performing the operation on the elements of the set gives the elements of that set. And the union of two sets is a set itself. So, the set of sets is closed under the operation of union. For example, if we have a set A with elements 2, 4, 6, 8 and a set B with elements 6, 8, 10, 12, let us show that A union B is a set. We know that A union B is a set with elements that are either in A or B or in both, that is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 and 12. This is a set. So we have verified the closure property of union of sets. The commutative property of union of sets is that A union B is equal to B union A. In other words, the union of two sets is the same no matter what the order is in the equation. Let us verify this property by using the Venn diagram. Let us take the universal set U and two sets A and B in it. Now set A union B in this Venn diagram is exactly the same as what set B union A would be. The associative property for union is that the union of C with A union B is the union of A with B union C. It means that the order in which sets are grouped does not change the result. We shall verify the associative property for union by first representing the three sets, say A, B and C, as a Venn diagram. We then show A union B, then show A union B, union C. Now in the Venn diagram that represents the three sets A, B and C, we show B union C and then show A union, B union C. From the Venn diagram obtained for A union B, union C and for A union, B union C, we can see that they are equal. Given set A, is there any set such that the union of A with that set gives set A itself? The answer is yes. In fact, one such set is the null set. The union of set A with a null set is the set A itself. This is actually the basis of the law of identity for union of. The law of identity for union of sets states that the union of a set and the empty set is the same as the original set. We write the identity law mathematically as shown, and we can say that phi is the identity of U. It would be quite trivial to prove this law. If an element belongs to the union of A and phi, it obviously belongs to A, as it cannot belong to a null set that has no elements. The union of A with A is the set A itself. This is actually the basis of the idempotent law for union of sets. This law states that the union of two identical sets is the same as the original set. We write the idempotent law mathematically as shown, and proving it analytically, if an element belongs to the union of A and A, then it belongs to A. The law of universal set states that the union of the universal set with a given set A is the universal set. In order to prove this universal law, let X be an element of U union A, which means that X is an element of U or X is an element of A. But A is included in U, so X is an element of U. So, U union A is a subset of U. Let's call this equation 1. Also, U is a subset of U union A. Let's call this equation 2. From 1 and 2, we have verified the result. On the sports day, 4 students won medals in basketball and 3 students won medals in the 100-meter race. Also, 2 students got medals in both the games. If we represent the students who won medals in each sport as a set, then the 2 students who won medals in both games are common to the 2 sets. This situation model is another important operation on sets called the intersection of sets that we shall explore now. In the earlier situation, we have seen that the 2 students who got medals in both categories form the intersection of the set of students who got medal in basketball and the set of students who got medals in the 100-meter race. So, the intersection of 2 sets is the set of elements common to the sets under consideration. Let's formalize the definition of intersection of sets. The intersection of 2 sets A and B is the set of all elements that are common to both A and B. In other words, intersection of 2 sets is the set of all those elements that belongs to both sets A and B. This symbol that looks like an inverted U is used to denote the intersection of sets. In the set builder form, we write A intersection B as a set of elements X such that X belongs to set A as well as to set B. When sets do not have anything in common, then their intersection is an empty set. Such sets are called disjoint sets. Note that the use of the word "and" between 2 sets in defining an intersection is quite significant. Recall that while defining a union, we use the word "or" between the 2 sets. Use of these 2 words, or and "and", is helpful in determining whether the membership between the 2 sets is intersection or union. Similar to union, can we also have an intersection of more than 2 sets? Let's find out. Well, the answer is yes. As in the case of union, the intersection of sets is also a binary operation and the intersection of sets gives us a set. So, intersection of sets can be extended to 3 or more than 3 sets. Let us now see how to define intersection of 3 sets A, B and C. Taking A intersection B as a set, we have A intersection B intersection C as a set of elements X such that X belongs to set A intersection B and set C, which further means the set of elements that belong to set A, set B and set C. We can extend this definition of intersection to n sets as shown. We will now see how to represent the operation of intersection of sets A and B by a Venn diagram. We shall draw a Venn diagram for the operation of intersection. Talking of two sets, let us recall that there can be 3 possibilities. First possibility is that there are some elements in common to the 2 sets. The second possibility is that all elements of one set are there in the second set, and the third possibility is that the sets have no common elements. Let's consider each possibility one by one to understand intersection of sets. When 2 sets A and B have some common elements, then their intersection is represented as a Venn diagram as shown. Observe this Venn diagram. It shows that when set B is a subset of set A, the entire set B is the intersection of sets A and B. This Venn diagram shows that when sets A and B do not have anything in common, then their intersection is a null set. Thus, we have seen the representation of intersection of sets A and B by a Venn diagram in all 3 cases. Let us now discuss the properties satisfied by the operation of intersection of sets. The main properties of intersection of sets are the closure property, the commutative property, the associative property, the law of phi, the law of the universal set U, the idempotent law, and the distributive law. Let us discuss each property one by one. The first property of operation of intersection of sets is the closure property. Closure property states that a set is closed under an operation if on performing the operation on the elements of the set gives the element of that set. And for every pair of sets A and B, A intersection B is also a set. So, the set of sets is closed under the operation of intersection. For example, if we have a set A with elements 2, 4, 6, 8 and set B with elements 6, 8, 10 and 12, then by definition, A intersection B contains elements that are common to both sets A and B, that is 6 and 8. This is a set. So, we have verified the closure property of intersection of sets. The commutative property of intersection is that A intersection B is equal to B intersection A. In other words, the intersection of 2 sets is the same no matter what the order is in the equation. Let us verify this property of set using the Venn diagram. Let us take the universal set U and 2 sets A and B in it. Now set A intersection B in this Venn diagram is exactly the same as set B intersection A. The associative property for intersection is that the intersection of C with A intersection B is the intersection of A with B intersection C. From this property, we can infer that the manner in which sets are grouped does not change the result. We shall verify the associative property for intersection by representing the 3 sets, say sets A, B, and C as a Venn diagram. We show A intersection B, then A intersection B, intersection C. Now, In the Venn diagram that represents the three sets A, B and C, we show B intersection C and then A intersection B intersection C. From the Venn diagram obtained, we can see that the sets are equal. You may be intrigued by the name of this property of intersection. It is called the law of phi. The law of phi states that the intersection of an empty set with any set is an empty set. We can verify this law of intersection very easily. We can infer that the intersection of an empty set with a set is an empty set. Let's verify the law of phi for the given set A. The empty set we know has no elements. As expected, we find that A intersection empty set equals an empty set. Given set A, is there any set such that intersection of set A with that set gives set A itself? The answer is yes. One such set is the universal set. This forms the basis of the law of U, the universal set. The law of U states that the intersection of a universal set with any set is the set itself. We can verify the law of universal set by taking a set, say, set A. The intersection of set A with a universal set will obviously be set A. The intersection of set A with set A is the set A itself. This fact is actually the basis of the idempotent law of intersection. This law states that the intersection of a set with itself is the set itself. We write the idempotent law mathematically. It is quite trivial to verify this law using a Venn diagram. There is a law that involves a combination of the operations of union and intersection. This law is called the distributive law. It states that the intersection operator is distributed over the union operator and the union operator is distributed over the intersection operator. We can verify this relation with the help of a Venn diagram. In the first diagram, the colored region shows the union of sets B and C. The colored region in the second diagram shows the intersection of set A with the union obtained in the first diagram, that is, B union C. Here, draw A intersection B and then A intersection C and then take their union. We can see that both sets are equal. Let us now see how to prove the commutative, associative, and the distributive properties of intersection of sets. Let us recall that two sets are equal only if they contain the same elements. We will use a theorem to prove these properties. The theorem states that if A and B are two sets, then set A will be equal to set B if A is a subset of B and B is a subset of A. To prove this, it is enough to prove that A is a subset of B and B is a subset of A. And hence, we can infer that A equals B. The word Wright reminds us of the Wright brothers who invented the world's first successful airplane. We are also reminded of another word that sounds exactly like it. Right. If the letters of these two words are expressed as sets, then this is how the sets will appear. Do you notice any difference in the two sets? Well, the answer to this is in the operation difference of sets. Let's explore it. Let's define the difference of the two sets A and B. The difference A minus B is the set of all elements that are in set A but not in set B. Similarly, we can define the difference B minus A as the set of all elements that are in set B but not in set A. Let's understand how to find the difference of two sets by striking off the elements in one set that are present in the other set also. Let's take the sets A and B as shown here. Now, to find A minus B, we look at each element of set B one by one and strike it off in the set A if it is present in set A. The difference, set A minus B, is the set of elements that remain in set A. Similarly, let us find B minus A, the difference between set B and set A. Now to find B minus A, we look at each element of set A one by one and strike it off in set B, if it is there in set B. Note that the difference of two given sets is not the difference between the sets as we usually understand the word difference. We shall now see how to represent the difference of sets pictorially. Let us recall that given two sets A and B, there can be three possibilities. 1. That there are some elements in common to the two sets. 2. That the sets have no common elements. And 3. That all elements of one set are there in the second set. Let's take each type one by one to understand the difference well. We will start with the most general case where sets A and B have something in common. Now, we can represent the difference A minus B and B minus A by using Venn diagram as shown here. Now, let us take the case of disjoint sets. The difference A minus B is the set of all elements that are in A but not in B, which means all of set A. And the difference B minus A is the set of all elements that are in B but not in A, meaning set B. Lastly, let us consider sets such that one set is completely contained in the other. Here, all elements of set B are in set A. Therefore, there is no element in the set B minus A. The difference A minus B is the set of all elements that are in A but not in B. Is there any way in which we can express union in terms of difference? Yes, indeed, there is. We can express the union operation in terms of the difference of two sets. Let us take a case of two sets A and B that are not mutually disjoint. That is, they have some elements in common. In this Venn diagram, let us shade the part that corresponds to A minus B, B minus A, and the intersection of A and B. Then, it can be seen visually that the union of three sets A minus B, B minus A, and A intersection B is A union B. Note that all the three sets A minus B, B minus A, and A intersection B are disjoint. Let us now do some problems on finding the difference in sets.
We have learned some operations on sets and examined their properties. Let's go over them so that we can then apply them to solve problems. We'll begin with the operation of union of sets. A union B is a set containing all elements X such that X belongs to A or to B. The union operation can be extended to n sets as well. Now let's see the intersection of two sets. The intersection of sets A and B is the set of all elements which are common to both A and B. The operation of intersection can be extended to three or more sets too. Next, the difference of sets. If A and B are two given sets, the difference A minus B is the set of all elements that are in A but not in B. Similarly, the difference B minus A gives the set of all elements that are in B but not in A. Finally, let's recall the operation of complement of a set. The complement of set A is the set of all elements of U which are not elements of A.
We often use the word complement in our daily language. For example, we say night and day complement each other, or water and land complement each other. Not far removed from this meaning of the word complement is the set operation, which takes all those elements which are not in the set A. This amounts to taking the difference of set A from the universal set U. Let's know more about the complement of a set. Let's define the complement of a set. Recall that the difference of set A and set B is the set of all elements that are in A but not in B. Extending the discussion, set U minus A is the set of all elements that are in U but not in A. So U minus A will have all those elements which are simply not in A. This set is called the complement of A. We define the complement of A as the set of all elements of U which are not the elements of A. Complement of a set is denoted by A dash or A to the power C or not A as shown. Just like other operations, the complement of a set too can be represented by Venn diagrams. To do so, we represent the universal set U with a rectangle and a set A inside it with a circle. Now, the shaded area outside A in the rectangle represents A complement. Notice that the number of elements of A and the number of elements of A complement make up the total number of elements in U. As we have seen, the complement of a set A is defined as the difference of the universal set and the set A. Can we express the difference of any two sets using complement of a set? Yes, we can express the difference of sets using the complement as shown. Let's verify how the two sets are equal by drawing the Venn diagram. Let's first represent two sets A and B which are not disjoint by a Venn diagram. Now, let us represent the complement of B and then A intersection the complement of B. Thus, we represent the difference of A and B. The shaded portion in both figures is identical, so we have verified that A minus B is the same as A intersection the complement of B. Similarly, we can show that B minus A is the same as the intersection of B and the complement of A. We are given that the universal set U is the set of single-digit numbers and B is a set with elements 0, 1, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. Find the complement of B and represent it with a Venn diagram. U is the set of single-digit numbers. B is the set with elements 0, 1, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. U minus B gives the complement of B. The shaded area outside B represents the complement of set B, that is, all single-digit numbers except 0, 1, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. Given that the universal set U is a set of all the alphabets in the English language and that Y is the set of alphabets E, F and G, we have to find the complement of set Y. The complement of set Y is the difference of U and Y. So, it is all the alphabets except E, F and G. We are given that the universal set U is the set of natural numbers from 1 to 10 and P is the set with elements 1, 3, 5, 7 and 9. Find the complement of P. U is the set of numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. P is the set of numbers 1, 3, 5, 7 and 9. The complement of P is given by U minus P. This complement of P is equal to the set with numbers 2, 4, 6, 8 and 10. Given the universal set and set A, find the complement of set A. We need to first find the complement of A. It is the difference of U and A and is the set of elements 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. Now, the complement of A is the difference of U and A complement. So, it is the set of the elements 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, which is the same as set A. Therefore, the complement of A is the set A itself. We understand the complement of sets well. What about the complement of union and the complement of intersection? What will they be equal to? Let us find out. A mathematician named Augustus De Morgan gave two important laws involving the operation of the complement of union and intersection of sets. Let us take each of the two laws that are called De Morgan's laws and study them one by one. The first law states that the complement of the union of two sets A and B is equal to the intersection of their complements. It is easier to think about something if you have a picture of it in front of you. So, let us verify this law by using a Venn diagram. First, we sketch the general intersecting sets A and B. Then, we shade the set A union B. And then, its complement. We shade the complement of A, and then the complement of B, and then the common points of these regions to get A complement intersection B complement. We find that the final shadings are the same in the two figures, thereby confirming the identity. The second De Morgan's law states that the complement of the intersection of two sets A and B is equal to the union of their complements. First, we sketch the general intersecting sets A and B. Then, we shade the set A intersection B and then its complement. Now, we shade the complement of A and then the complement of B. Then, we shade the common points of these regions to get A complement union B complement. We find that the final shadings are the same in the two figures, thereby confirming the identity. To memorize the laws, we can use the mnemonic, break the line and change the sign. Thus, complement of union is the intersection of their complements. And the complement of intersection is the union of their complements. Consider this situation in a group of students. 20 students play football, 15 students play cricket, and 5 students play both the games. Assuming that each of these students plays at least one of the two games, how many students are there in this group? The use of sets in counting can help in answering such questions. Let us see how. To understand the use of sets in counting, let us consider two sets A and B. Set A has elements 1, 2 and 3, while set B has elements 4, 5, 6 and 7. In this case, sets A and B are disjoint, that is, they do not have any common element. If we have to find the total elements in both the sets, we simply add the number of elements in each of them. Recall that A union B consists of all elements that are in set A or set B. So, the number of elements of A union B gives the total elements of sets A and B. This is the simplest counting theorem, which states that if there are two sets A and B such that A and B are disjoint and finite, then the number of elements in the union of A and B is the sum of the number of elements in each set. Let's extend our discussion to a case where the sets are not disjoint. In such a case, things become a bit complicated because there are some elements that are common to both the sets. Note that in such cases, when we add the number of elements in the two sets, the elements that are common to the two sets are counted twice. That is, the number of elements in the union of A and B is not equal to the sum of the number of elements in set A and set B. So, how do we correct this equation? Well, to correct the equation, we need to take away the elements that are common to both A and B, that is, the number of elements in A intersection B. So, we subtract n, A intersection B from n, A plus n B. This gives us the exact number of elements of A union B. We can even count the number of elements of sets A and B by counting the number of elements of A minus B, B minus A, and A intersection B. All these sets are disjoint sets. So, the sum of the elements of these sets gives the number of elements in A and B. This gives a new form of counting theorem. So, the counting theorems for two sets are as shown here. These counting theorems are also known as the inclusion-exclusion principle. Let us go back to the problem posed in the beginning regarding finding out the total number of students who plays at least one of the two games, football or cricket. Let A be the set of students who play football and B be the set of students who play cricket. So the number of elements in set A are 20 and that in set B are 15. Now there are 5 students in the group that play both the games. So the number of elements in A intersection B are 5. Applying the counting theorem for non-disjoint sets, let us find out how many students are there in this group. On substitution and simplification, we get that there are 30 students in the group. So, we have seen how counting theorem for two sets is used to find the number of elements in the set. Can we extend the counting theorem sets to 3 sets? Let's find out. Counting theorem can be extended to 3 or more sets. Let's first check in case of disjoint sets. The elements in 3 sets are the sum of individual cardinal numbers of each set. In fact, for any number of disjoint finite sets, the total elements in all of them is the sum of individual cardinal numbers. But what if the 3 sets are non-disjoint? Well, the counting theorem for 3 non-disjoint sets is given by adding the number of elements in the 3 sets and then removing the elements in their intersection pairwise. But each time we remove the element in their pairwise intersection, we by default remove the elements common to all A, B and C. Which means we had first counted the elements common to all A, B and C thrice. And then we have removed it thrice. So now we must add the number of elements which are common in all A, B and C. This final step gives us the counting theorem for 3 non-disjoint sets. Let's now prove this theorem using the counting theorem for 2 non-disjoint sets. Consider A as one set and B union C as other set. Applying the counting theorem, we get equation 1. Now, Let's use the distributive law in the term A intersection B union C. Applying the counting theorem for two sets to A intersection B and A intersection C, we get equation 2. On substituting equation 2 in equation 1, we have the required result. So, the counting theorems for all three sets are as shown.